Well, good evening and welcome. We're so glad that you could join us here on Wednesday night. We're starting a brand new series tonight, and we're going to look at one parable, the parable of the prodigal son or the lost son, or as some people call it, the faithful father. Now, we know that you've heard this parable before and probably heard it a lot. And so what we have for you tonight and in subsequent episodes is 4 different installments of a modern view, a modern take, a modern interpretation of the parable. So we want to start our conversation tonight with these two, Luke and Leah, about parables, why Jesus taught with them, what they are. And let's start with this question. What's your favorite parable, if you had to pick one? Luke?
For me, I would have to say one of my favorites is the parable of the vineyard owner when he goes and he recruits people to work for him throughout the day, and then at the end of the day, he pays them all the same.
Wrong. Leah?
Mine is the parable of the sower.
That is correct. Now, everybody has a favorite parable, and why do you think Jesus taught in parables? What's the whole point of using a story? Why not just tell them, I don't want to hear the story, I just want to know the teaching? Why do you think, Leah, that Jesus used parables to make his point?
I think stories are always an easy way to teach something. I think it makes it abstract enough while also giving people time to interpret it their own way.
Okay, so there's some open interpretation.
Yes.
What about you, Luke? You want to take a stab at that one? What's the deal with parables?
Yeah, I feel like Leah said it well, is that it's up to the interpretation of how you hear it. He's not saying you must hear it like this. It's like much of Scripture. It's, you do the research, you take it for how you hear it.
I think it's engaging. I think it's what I would call sticky. It's easier to remember a story than it is to remember a lesson. Yeah. But you remember the story and then you remember the lesson. But you're in good company when you ask the question, why parables? In Matthew 13, Jesus tells the parable of the sower, and his disciples come to him and say, why do you speak to people in parables? And in verse 11 he says, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have in abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken away from them. That's why I speak to them in parables, which I think is interesting, that Jesus doesn't really clearly answer the question, but then he points back to Scripture. He points back to Isaiah. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled that prophecy of Isaiah. So there's a way to gain insight in a more approachable way. Mm-hmm. Let's continue the discussion here before we ask you to watch. How do you interpret a parable? What do you do as you engage in these? What do they need to know before they watch this, Luke? What are some, as we're watching this as a family, and it's only about a 8-minute clip?
6 minutes.
6-minute clip. And so as they're watching this, what questions do they need to be asking?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's very important is your point of view of the parable, who you relate to the most as you read this and as you see it. With what eyes are you seeing it with? So
maybe find a character that you can take their perspective. Jesus always told parables in context to other people. And you'll find it within the story. What else can you do as they're watching this tonight, Leah? As kiddos are watching it, what do they need to look for?
Look for parallels in your own life. Have you ever been in the footsteps of the Father? Have you been in the shoes of the Son? Have you had that interaction with God, or even with your own parents, or with your own relationships?
So you're looking for somebody that you can say, I have been there, I've done that, I felt that way. And then I think this is real important when you watch anything. When you're reading a book, to ask the question of why. What's the motivation? Why would one character do this, and why would one respond in the other way? Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Who do you relate to? Ask why. What are the motivations? And find somebody that you can really say, that would be me. I would act that way. Okay, we're going to take a break. Watch this clip, and then we're going to come back and make some observations and ask some more questions.
right? The story again.
He reads them himself. I was there. I watched one people being made.
Cheers, my friends. Cheers for a beautiful night. Let's do this. That's always a good time.
I don't understand.
I don't want to be here anymore.
Then what do you mean?
This is all yours. This isn't mine.
You don't have to work at the shop.
It's not about that.
What then?
Just being here. With you. I can't have my own anything.
You have a life of your own.
No, I don't. This house, the town, the shop, people here don't even call me by name. I'm always your son.
Well, that's how they know you.
Exactly. The mechanic's son.
What's wrong with that?
It's embarrassing.
You're embarrassed of me?
I just want a life of my own. Without you.
Well, one day I'll be gone, and you will. And then half of all this will be yours. You can do whatever you want with your
Well,
car.
I wish that day was today.
You don't mean that.
I do.
If I'm already dead to you. And here. That's yours. The rest goes to your brother.
All right, we hope you enjoyed watching that. And again, we know it's a story that you've heard before, but we hope that we can uncover some gems that maybe you hadn't discovered before. All right, so let's talk a bit about motivation, asking that question about why. What does the prodigal son want here? This kid that's asking for his inheritance. Why is he doing that, Leah? What do you think?
He feels like he is not his own person without being broken away from his father. He doesn't feel like he can have his own identity while being attached, while living in his father's home, while living off of his father's money. He feels like in order to have his own life, he has to completely break away.
So that idea of being maybe rebellious, I think so many times we take this story and we look at it just on a real surface level, and I never really have asked, why does the prodigal son want to leave? He kind of has everything. Things are good. It's not a bad life that he's living.
Right.
So what is it? Is that endemic to all of us? Do we all have this need to get away and be our own person? What do you think, Luke? What's he doing this for?
Right. I think what the video does a really good job of is it kind of gives that son a dialogue where we don't really have that in the story. We have that he wants to leave, but it doesn't really give him a dialogue. And I think that the word embarrassing came up. He was embarrassed to be in his father's home. It was embarrassing for him to not be his own person. And so I think for me, when I read this now, I see that as, man, I'm so embarrassed of being known by somebody who's not my own name, right? I don't want to be the mechanic's son anymore, right? I want to be, fill in the blank. And so for me, that's what I hear. That's what that motivation is. I'm so embarrassed of everything around me. I want it to be mine.
Can we all identify with that? This idea of maybe not. It's not that he hates the father. It's not. He wants to be his own person, his own thing. Can you guys identify with that? Think about times when you were younger, not much younger, Luke, but when you just wanted to be your own person. I never wanted to be known as my brother's brother. We were mixed up a lot. We looked a lot alike. He was 5 years older than me. And I hated it when people called me by the wrong name. I can remember shortly after getting my license of wanting to go and drive kind of in the middle of the night without anybody knowing where I was. Not because I wanted to do anything bad, but just because I wanted control. Yeah, I wanted the freedom. What about you, Leah? Where do you find yourself being prodigal?
I don't know that I've ever had a specific moment. I think there are milestones in life, and going off to college is one of them. You feel free, but you also know you have a sense of security in where you're going. So I think for me, I always wanted boundaries. That's just how I operate. So I knew I was free from one boundary and then entered another one. So I was never in limbo, I guess you could say, but it felt freeing just to go from one to the other.
Okay, I want to talk about the father because we want to look at this from different perspectives. And really, in the video tonight, we just get the father and the son. Other son will come into play. A couple other things will come into play. But how would a father interpret a request of, hey, I want my inheritance? The worldly father in me is like, oh, well, if that's the case, here's a check, and I don't want to have anything to do with you. But that's not the father's response. That's not what we see, even in the video. What do you see in the father there of how he internalizes this request of his son?
Yeah, I guess I'd never really thought about contextually what the prodigal son is saying to his father when he's saying, I want my half now. And what that relates to now is, I wish you were dead so I could already have my money. And so I'm not a father that I know of. And so to interpret that as a father, to say that my son just came to me and said, I can't wait for you to die so I can have half of your money. Right, and in the script or in the Bible, his response is, "Okay, here you go." And you got to think, he's telling this parable to sinners, Pharisees, teachers, and they're all going, "Well, no, that would never happen."
Right.
The interpretation back then would be, "Oh, he would just cast his son out. He would totally disown him, not have anything to do with him." And the story says, "Well, that's not what happened."
Yeah,
right? The father completely goes the other way.
Which the son is basically saying, the highest value that you have for me is what you can provide. It's the stuff. Now, this is a dangerous thought because it's not just sons that have this thought. There are parents who think that the highest value of what we can do for our kids is to provide them, and provide for them in these ways into a place that gets not just of abundance, but actually detrimental to a child's health. So why would the father do this? Why would the father write the check? Why grant this request? Why not just say, you know what, buddy, get out of here? Why do you think the father writes the check, Leah?
I think it comes down to the amount of love the father has for the son. I can't imagine how heartbreaking it is to have that request from a son that you have loved and raised and given everything to, but it happened. And instead of getting angry, instead of lashing out and saying, this is my roof, you can live under it or leave, he said, okay, here you go.
Yeah, there's some biblical parallels here, where in Romans 1, we read this Sunday actually, it was part of the sermon on Sunday, that God actually takes us and says, okay, if this is what you want, then I'm going to give you over. I'm going to answer your request, and it's not in their best interest. In Romans 1:24, it says, therefore God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, and forever, who is forever praised. Okay, I want to hone in on this real quick. This will be our one point for tonight. Is that God is saying here, or Paul is saying here, that we wanted stuff, created things, more than we wanted the Creator. Luke, how does that play out in the story? Why would we ever want God's stuff more than we would want God?
I think it goes back to that idea of the embarrassment, right? I see all around me people have stuff, and it's much easier to promote myself. I would say, look at my stuff, rather than I say, look at the stuff that God gave me, right? It's more of that sense of, I earned this my way than I was graciously given this a different way.
What about you, Leah? Why would we want God's stuff more than we would want God?
I think it's a part of our humanity. We can physically see something in front of us and know that it's real, that it's valuable, whereas the value of God and the image of God is so abstract. It's not something we can see right in front of our face. And the distance between us and God is sometimes hard to bridge.
Well, there's also a point here of how many people come to God only wanting to leverage Him for His power. So, I don't want to live by God's rules. I don't want to live by His boundaries. I don't want to be known by Him. I'm kind of embarrassed for people to call me a Christian. But when a bad diagnosis comes, or I lose my job, or I'm lonely, then I want God's stuff. I want Him to provide. I want Him to heal. I want Him to show up. And in the very selfishness of me, I would think if I were God, I'd be like, no, if you don't want me, if you don't want my boundaries, then you can have my stuff. But I think this is the point of the parable, or at least one of the points is that God loves you enough to continue to bless you, even when you're pushing back, embarrassed about Him. Any other things that we can pick up here? Maybe some advice or some let's go and do this. I would say to parents, let's be careful about the boundaries that we set, that we don't overindulge our kids, but also that we don't press a load on them that's so hard that all they can ever think about is wanting to get out and get out from under. It's this beautiful balance that God shows us of, yes, I'm going to bless you, but I'm going to bless you in ways that are going to help you, not hurt you. Sometimes, I hate to say it, sometimes the cure is not what's best for us. Sometimes that job situation, that relationship is not what's best for you. So He's not going to give you the stuff that in the long term is going to hurt you. What else, guys? Is there another, maybe let's go and do this kind of point after tonight's, what do we do with this lesson? We heard it, we believe it, but what do we do with it?
Right. I think I want to jump back to the beginning when we're talking about the point of view of where we read the story, and don't be so quick to say, well, I'm a teacher of the law versus a sinner, right? That's the point of view I'm going to take. I'm not like those people out there that live like that. Or maybe you've now seen this interpretation of the story and you go, well, maybe I do lean a little bit more towards that son, because maybe you've always associated yourself with the second son.
Yeah, and it's what's beautiful about the parable is at times we all play those different roles.
Right.
I've been the second son. I've been the prodigal son. I've been the father, so to speak, of people moving away. So there's room to use this parable at a lot of different times. Anything else for maybe for kids, Leah, that as we think about this, how would a kid respond to hearing this story? Is it don't run away? Is that the story?
Yes, don't run away.
Don't run away, kids.
But also just remember the words you say to your parents and really to anyone is powerful. The way you say it, the tone of your voice, it comes across many different ways and can be interpreted different ways. So remember that the way you speak to people, especially people you love, is important.
All right, so talk tonight. Who do you see yourself as in the story? What do you do with this lesson? How are you different? What behavior might you change having heard this story? Come back next week. It's going to be the same parable, a different part of it from a different perspective with a whole lot of different lessons. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week.